Today we're gonna sketch this. So today I want us to work on this sketch. Now the process itself was very long. This is gonna be a gift actually, so I really took my time with it and worked slowly. The only time I can be patient about a painting or sketch is when I know it's a gift for someone. And so what I will do is we'll start real time and I'll sort of explain what I'm doing, and we'll put some time lapse as I go along, because the cross-hatching part is very repetitive and there's not a lot of value in it aside from the overall plan for how to do it. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so unlike my usual spontaneous sketches that I show you so much, as I mentioned, this one really requires some more preparation, you know. It was a bit complicated just to approach it. By the way, the reference image will be in the description box. It's just a random picture from Google Images, so I don't really want to use it in the video because it has, you know, it belongs to someone. But you can definitely just even search for the car, Porsche 911 reimagined, and you will find it. But anyway, I really felt the need to build this up properly and slowly understand where I'm at in terms of the drawing. So what you see now is the top part of the car, and this is the very back. The car is facing to the right and towards us, so sort of diagonally to our right. And yeah, just putting in the windshield right now, the shape. I'm not exactly 100% accurate. Take a look at the reference and you'll see it's like there is a bit of a skew in the way I did it. But finally, when the details come in, it looks much better. For example, this line should be much more horizontal. And yeah, it just happens sometimes. This is a very challenging perspective and angle for me. Sorry about all the focus changes, just because of my hand. So now just getting the front part, where basically this is where the headlights are. And this is the side of the body of the car. Yeah. Just getting in some hints so that I know what lines I should follow, you know. Just so that I can understand later on with the pen. And sometimes even this won't be enough. Sometimes you need to sort of go into more details even in your initial sketch. For me it was enough, and I was able to sort of pull it into a finalized sketch, but sometimes, especially if you're just in the beginning, then it can be a little more challenging. I really recorded the entire process so you can see me stop and think, and I'm unsure where to continue from here. What I end up doing is just connecting the bottom part of the side of the car, just so that I know where to put in the wheels and you know, all of that good stuff. Starting to just get an indication for where I want to place them. The wheels play an important part in any car drawing, sketch, or painting. I did mess up just a bit with the angle of the wheel. It happens and it's totally okay. The low part of the car should go even lower than that, and I will correct that in a moment. But now getting the farther wheel was quite a bit of a challenge as well. I would recommend using maybe a line like I'm doing now. I just ghost above it. So if you know, ghosting is just when you move your hand where you want to place the line, but you don't actually touch the paper, and it just helps you to sort of get the motion in before you go for the real thing. The one problem I have here is that the wheel at the front should be a little more squashed, just like the wheel in the back. And I didn't get it like squashed enough in that sense. So now just getting some of the mountain, just to get the context of the scene. There's a few mountains in the background, and there's a sort of an asphalt area just below just under the car. And you can see later on, you'll see there's a separation between a grassy area that leads to sort of the fields. Yeah, really trying to make my way around this and slowly build it. It all started with the curved line for the top. And sometimes you'll get that first line wrong and you need to erase and redraw it. I was pleased with it, even though I will admit it wasn't perfect. But yeah, I just decided to go with it, you know. Now, just there is a division of the car's doors. and it's important to get it in just to sort of assess the total length. And it's something I started saying recently, that sketching or drawing is just a game of comparisons. All the time you compare stuff. You compare one thing to another. You try and compare one angle to another angle. Now the line I'm putting on right now, I'm trying to compare it to the line I'm touching right now. Trying to get that right balance between the lines. Not always easy. Some comparisons are super challenging, and this is when you get to a point or a part where it's hard to get an accurate sketch. It happens many times, especially for me personally with curved shapes. Whenever I need to get a curved shape in, it's a little harder to do the comparison. So now trying to work my way towards the front part of the car with the details of the bottom part of the bumper. I'm trying to, this is like the wheel. Now when I see it, actually it looks not as accurate as I hoped for. Now there's a shadow just underneath the car that I want to use to really anchor it to the ground. It was also in the original reference, but to get it in, I need to finish the wheels and just to make sure the bottom part is right. So yeah, now I'm putting in that shape of the shadow. I'm trying to use negative and positive space just to understand where to place it. So I notice there's a gap between the car and the shadow, meaning there's some ground that's lighter, and this is what makes the shadow clearer. So I'm trying to get that in, and of course it'll all be much clearer when I actually go in for the shading. Now what you see now is real time. It's about this is real time, the same pace that I actually sketched it, so it may be a bit slow. When I start to do the inking, because I'm literally going over some of the lines I did, I run it at twice the speed, and when I reach the cross-hatching stage, I run it at 4 times, because cross-hatching, you saw, it's just a long, tedious process that really takes time. So basically now I have the sort of skeleton of the shape of the car. I'm trying to figure out at this point how detailed I should go with it. Okay, this is what I'm literally trying to figure out. I'm zooming in on the picture, trying to understand how many details I do need to include in it so that I can understand what to do with the pen. So now you can see in the image as well, there is the windows on the other side of the car that's facing away from us are visible through the front windshield. And so it was important to get them in. Basically, I'm trying to get in every shape that has an influence on the shadows as well. Just getting that separation between the asphalt and the grass I told you about earlier. And the back of the car with the back bumper. I don't know what it's called. Let me know. And these are basically all the details I need to just go in and shade it. So in a sketch it, sorry, with the pen. So starting again with the top, and usually you want to go when you just ink from left to right. I don't really talk about it too much in the spontaneous sketching videos, but I tend to go from left to right because it just makes more sense. You don't want to smear your own ink. So this is something just to keep in mind. I'm trying to, not touch it with my hand. Actually, with textured paper like this one, I really feel like it's so much easier to not smear it. With smoother paper, you can, or Bristol paper, that's the worst. You can very easily smear the ink that you already put on paper. Now, the most challenging parts are these curves on the top. Just long curves I find very challenging. I know some people that want to get like very accurate, sort of almost schematic sketches or product sketches. Use what you call French curves, the ruler that with all the different curvy shapes. Yeah, but I don't use that. I just try to use the good old hand for that. It is quite complex. Now, in terms of the variation of the width of the line, I don't really try to vary it as much. I'm okay with it because I will shade it in depth. But if I would maybe paint it or maybe color it, if it wasn't like, if the emphasis here wasn't on colors or something like this, then I may try to get more of a variation here. I'm just trying to get a good feeling for every line I place, basically. So there are some subtle details that you want to get in properly. For example, the top part of the windshield, there are two lines representing it. As you can see, it's sort of the bevel of the metal above the glass. And it's these little details that make stuff look realistic, aside from the general shape, which you saw hopefully that the pencil shape already looked good. So a good base is important. Like sometimes you see a sketch that maybe doesn't look as accurate, or maybe you do a sketch and you don't feel confident with it. It's usually in just the very basic shapes that maybe you got wrong, or the person who did it got it wrong. It has a huge influence. But once you get that initial look, in order to get the more realistic look, you have to put in some more of the details, and just get the right amount of details, I guess. So for the windshields now, for the side, like the windows, also the same thing. You can see there are sort of two lines there, and they're parallel, well, sort of parallel. They're not straight lines, but they never meet. In theory, they never meet. With my sketch, they kind of do. So now, this area I found in particular challenging. Everything that has to do with above the wheels. You'll notice how the wheel is sort of hiding inside the metal skeleton of the car. And it was just very challenging. You see the gap here between the wheel and the metal. And this area will be heavily shaded, which will give it a nice sense of depth. Actually, very pleased with how I got that rear tire. The front one was proved to be much more of a challenge. As I told you, I should have squashed it a bit more. Yeah, usually as I mentioned earlier, I don't tend to give too much importance to width, but sometimes I will, just as a thought of making things clearer for me. For example, the lines I'm drawing now, I draw them very lightly and they're like as thin as I can. The reason why is because they're not going to be too significant. It's just going to be an area that's completely almost in shadow through the windshield. And so I don't try to, these lines also, it's just the way the door is opening. I don't try to make these lines super obvious because they shouldn't be. You know, it's just sort of, not scratches, but sort of parts that are inside the metal, like small gaps maybe, or creases, I don't know how you call it. Not creases, there's another word. Creases is for clothes. Anyway, you write it in the comment section. So now I'm getting the shape of the front, and this is where it was a bit complicated, required some thought, because I didn't really go into details there. You see, I left it really like a box, just a boxy shape. And again, the more details you give yourself with the pencil, the easier it is to come back with a pen and ink it. But depending on your strengths, maybe, and the way you are sort of the things you excel at, you may need more or less details. So for me, it's really easy for me to see something and just transfer it immediately to paper, so I can afford to leave a very loose initial sketch. And also, sometimes you just want to do it just to give yourself more freedom. But some people, and it's really natural, will want to leave more details with the pencil. The same goes, by the way, for painting. You know, that you do the first drawing with the pencil, and depending on how comfortable you are with the medium, you can put more or less details with the pencil and leave the rest for the color. Which really, for me, watercolor is a good example. I'm still not at a point where I just throw it in there and then get the watercolor to do most of the work. I'm not like that. I need more details. But with a pen, no, I'm much better, so I can just do that. Getting in those, these lines are in perspective, so it's a bit more complex. They're all parallel in reality, so they never meet, and this causes sort of a weird angle. What we're looking at is basically a car in two-point perspective. 1 point on the right, 1 point on the left, but because the perspective is so not obvious here, it also loses some of its importance. Okay, so I just try to get these lines to be parallel, but there is a bit of a skewing in their shape. So yeah, it's just important to take note of that. Yeah, now getting the real details of the bumper. This was the part I enjoyed the most, actually. I don't know why, it just felt good to put it in there, and I knew that it's gonna be gonna look really good when once I shade it. especially because it's divided to two parts, which I'm gonna get that division in right now. And so the bottom part is a little more heavily shaded, it meets the sun less, and it's just more in shade. And then we have this bottom part that's really much darker. So just trying to figure out the order of working. As you can see, I don't work perfectly from left to right. I do put some weight into the logic of the order. So if something is more at the front, I'll get it in first. Such as here the metal area and then the wheel. So you kind of want to balance it out with everything. By the way, in terms of the actual sketching with the pen, it just takes practice. This is one thing that I would say, like, you may be able to understand what you see, but not really be able to sketch it the way you want. So you may have a picture in your head, or you see the object and you're like, I get it, I understand physically why it looks the way it looks, but then you may have a hard time translating it to a drawing. This can happen, especially if you have good visual perception, but you still didn't develop enough your technical skills, and it's fine. What you want to do is do a lot of pen exercises, try to do maybe a lot of cross-hatching. This really helps to just get a sense for how to get lines to look the way you want them to. You want to combine a lot of different things. You want to give yourself a lot of freedom on one hand, but on the other you want to really try and get like a perfect wall of cross-hatched lines, and you know, just combine everything to get the result you want. It's not an easy way, but think about it this way. I've been doing like sketching, pen sketching and all of that for years. It's like, and especially drawing with the pencil, it's like, it's just something I've been doing ever since I can remember myself. So my amount of experience in it is really serious, you know. Even though it was on and off, like if it was just on all the time, I would be a monster by now, but I'm not, because I took breaks, you know, during many periods of my life. But yeah, it can take like a few years to really feel comfortable with getting the lines you want, but it's worth it. I mean, drawing is really the basis for everything. I think really also for painting, you know, it's rare to get a really good painting without a good drawing under it, you know. And a good drawing doesn't have to be complex. I'm not saying it has to be full of details, but I am saying it has to be good. And so yeah, it can be a challenge if you're not that experienced in drawing. And I see a lot of people that sort of do, you know, they're really good at the painting part, but the drawing part is still, they don't have that much control over. And so if you feel like you need help with the drawing part, I'm putting always in the description box, you see the first thing you see is my beginner's drawing course. So you want to check that out for the drawing specifically. If you want to be able to translate what you see into a drawing, be sure to check that out, because it's really straightforward, it's simple, yeah, very affordable too, by the way. So now just getting those details of the inside parts of the wheels, of the tires. These I find super challenging. I won't lie to you, I'm not trying to get them to look perfect, because it's just a really complex set of shapes. So just trying to do my best to get it in there, and yeah. So yeah, you see it's just slowly building it up, all those little triangles, and it's not simple, but once the sort of cross-hatching layer will come over it, it'll be much easier to understand what's in there, and just the separation between the shapes. And some of you can already tell the front tire, I didn't do a good job. It should be much more at an angle. Right now it feels like the car, sort of the driver turned the wheel extremely to the left, because we see way too much of that wheel. So yeah. Same details on the back, and remember, the farther away it is, the less details you actually need to put in. So yeah, just putting in those mountains really simply, and there's a reason why I'm breaking these lines, because again, it's in the background. I don't want it to compete with my area of focus, which is the car. I will heavily cross-hatch the mountains in the back. That will happen, but in terms of the drawing right now, the sort of intuition I had told me to not try and get too many details. Now, there was this kind of a bush on the right side, and I decided to get it in. Really not a must. You can decide what you want to drop. It's your world, basically. You can decide anything that happens on paper. It's your decision. Yeah, so just getting in those fun little lines. Actually, looking at this really makes me want to to do some very simple sketches of characters, or even characters from TV shows or from like old cartoons I used to watch. I don't know. I just remembered right now how fun it was. I used to do it in elementary. I would sort of draw little characters of Pokemons, and people would. I remember I once sold like a sketch or a drawing of a Pokemon to a friend. It was actually quite funny. I should have charged more, definitely. It was just $1 maybe. Anyway, now getting in the lines that will indicate where I put the shadows, okay? Where I'm gonna crosshatch. So these sort of lines just show me the limit, the border between the dark area and the light area. And I'm getting them very lightly in there because there's no object in there. There's nothing in there. It's just for me to recognize it. And the style allows me to do it. You know, I'm not going for hyper-realism here. I'm just going for a good look. I'm not even sure what you define this, but yeah, it's definitely not realism. Yeah, I had a weird notification on my iPhone. I don't know what it is. So anyway, yeah, just dropping in those lines, and soon it will be just ready for cross-hatching, which is like the best looking part, but the most tedious and boring. And yeah, there's some interesting division of shadows here because the surface of the car is very reflective. So yeah, just getting in that first layer of cross-hatching, simply lots of parallel lines. And it's funny because what I do now looks fairly dark, but it's gonna need to have another layer. It's not dark enough because the contrast in the picture is like starking. It's really strong. But anyway, that first layer of cross-hatching, and you can see some lines are a bit too long for me to get in. They're a bit challenging, so I break them off into 2 lines. For big areas, you know, sometimes it's hard to just get it. You'll see it in the mountains as well. It's just so hard to cross-hatch like you know, large areas with one sweeping line and keep them all parallel. It's really hard. So even me with my like some people say super sketching skills, it's not easy. Okay, it's really a challenge. Sometimes you gotta break it off a bit just to get it in there. So yeah, just a bit shadow on the front side of the car. And one of the parts I love the most, and you'll see this hopefully soon, is the headlights. This is where you can really get the nice contrast between lights and darks because they're highly reflective. And yeah, the tires also should be dark, very dark. The front windshield, the windows on the sides. Yeah, let me know if this length of video is okay because it's quite long. It's like 30, I don't know, 7 minutes long, something like this, from what I've seen. So yeah, if it's too long, let me know. I can change the length, just squash a little more. But from what I gather, you like the time lapse, so I'm keeping. You like the real time. Sorry, so I'm keeping that trend and really going for as many real-time videos as I can. Like, it's the easiest for me to make a time-lapse video out of this one and like publish 2 versions, but I don't feel it's necessary. I don't feel like the time-lapse videos have enough unique value to them, you know. But if you feel differently, let me know. I'll be happy to do both. I actually talked about it on the comments, you know, that like it's 2 in 1, because if I make one sketch like this, I can use it for 2 videos. So it helps me space out my schedule because I have one time lapse and then the real time. But I just don't feel like it has enough value. Anyway, now getting to the real dark ones. Now, what you want to do, just as a basic cross hatching technique, when you get to that second layer of hatching, you want to go not entirely like I do here, 45 degrees with the first one. You want to take it at about half of that. And then the third layer, you want to go 45 degrees to the first one. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So, for example, what I'm doing now is a bit of a no-no. Okay, I should go with vertical lines. I just, at the moment, felt like the right thing to do like this, so, you know, whatever it is. Like right now, I'm going about 45 degrees to the initial hatching, so I should probably do like this first and only like this vertical, and only then go for it. I should probably make a video about cross hatching. I actually found a really good video on cross hatching a while ago, and I'll need to find it, and maybe I'll link it in the description box. Not sure if I'll be able to find it. The guy was doing it with a fountain pen, and the result was, it was beautiful. He did this beautiful tree. Yeah, so again, this area is a little darker because it curves away from the sunlight, and this again needs to be darker. I should have used again vertical lines, not or horizontal lines, not these kinds of lines, but you know, whatever works. As long as the overall look is okay, you're doing good. And by the way, something that watercolor really taught me at this point is to really stay away from judging any creation I make until I see the final result. You have to be able to postpone your judgment, which is a great topic for a video, and I'm going to write it down. Postpone judgment. I'll remember to make a vid. Basically what it means is that you don't want to judge it or feel discouraged by the way it looks when it's still in the making. And I think a lot of watercolor artists will agree with me on that one. It's just you can never know by the way it looks like in the middle of the process. So you really have to be able to give yourself some time to tighten things up before you jump to any conclusions. And it's true in this case as well. Sometimes something may not work, but you have to be patient with it and let it build itself with time, because it may look really good after another layer or two. Maybe you're missing some contrast in another area in the sketch or in the painting or whatever it is. Maybe you just need to better define some of the shapes. Maybe, you know, there's so many variables and you can't really know, you know. So yeah, as you can see, the windshield is fairly dark. The windows on the left sort of reflect the skies, and the windshield is at less of an angle to reflect them. So it probably reflects the terrain or something else, which is why it was so dark in the reference as well. Now I'm adding again the second layer to kind of make things, I try to get it gradual because there is a gradual change in the original picture. I'm not always successful with it. The one drawback of using cross-hatching is that it's hard to get a gradual pattern. As you'll soon see, I'm going to put another layer of cross-hatching at the very front of the car, just under the Porsche symbol. And you'll see it's very hard to get that gradual look. You need to have really good control of the hatching layers to do that. Every time I want to say layers, I'm like, my instinct is to say wash, but this isn't a wash. This isn't watercolor. Liron, get a grip. Get a grip. It's not watercolor. So yeah, now getting in that cross-hatching layer, as you can see here. And this, as I said, will be a gift. I'm really excited about it, and this is partially the reason, as I said in the intro, that I was able to be so patient with it. So I think I should definitely make some more gifts. Yeah, getting in those very top shadows under the metal area of the windshield. Yeah, and the car at this stage is almost done. The one thing that's missing is the mountains, and this is exactly what I'm doing now. I hope this won't bore you too much. Should have probably ran it faster than 4 times, but anyway, yeah, you'll forgive me. So just getting in those lines to represent the first layer of the cross-hatching, because it's so hard to make these lines long and parallel, so I really break it off into many different layers, and I kind of try to use it to my advantage here, because I try to use it as the texture, the extra texture for the mountains. If I have to be honest about the background, I don't feel too pleased with the way it turned out. Not the drawing itself, just the shading part. I just feel like I could have done much better at it. Maybe I should have gotten it a little darker. I'm not really sure what it is. It's hard for me to point the finger at the exact thing that annoys me with it. But I do know I could have done it a little better than that. So yeah, it happens. But the one thing I'm happy about is that it's really not the focus of this scene. So, you know, it's okay. I don't really care about it. The asphalt is very light compared to the background, so I'm just keeping it very simple, throwing in 2 layers. This is the first one, and then I'm going to put in a second one just to make it a little bit darker. And this is enough for that, and from this point on it's just a matter of getting the mountains and the background to be a little darker. It's fairly light at the moment, and the car should be the lightest thing, okay? Sometimes with the background you want to make it more faded, more light, more bright, but sometimes you want to use it to create a contrast. So in this example, the mountains should be fairly darker than the car in order to create a contrast with the car, okay? So this is exactly what I'm trying to get here. Just going in and adding more and more layers to it. Yeah. I hope it's somewhat entertaining to see me do this. Yeah, at this point, many times I have to take a break or maybe, you know, take a rest. But this time I was really like on fire, so I just kept at it. The line I drew really represents a division between the light part and the dark part of the mountain. And so I'm not touching some areas of it, as you can see. This is because the light comes from the left, and we have a beautiful sort of sunlight on the mountain. I actually considered doing this as a sketch, but combine some watercolor with it and maybe use the watercolor for the background. Could have been a good idea considering how freaking long this process was. But yeah, like now there's no avoiding it. I find that if I add watercolor to the result right now, it's just not as good as I want to. So it's basically too late. This is what I'm saying. It's basically too late now. And yeah, bear with me here. This is the last layer of cross-hatching for the mountains, for anything. I'm just adding very small details afterwards to create a feeling of ridges and just some details, rocks, you know. But in terms of the cross-hatching and the layering, this is the last one. And yeah, it's a really tiring process. I think like half the time of this entire thing was the cross-hatching. The drawing part also took some time because, you know, I wanted to get the proportions right. By the way, some of you may have seen the painting I did one day before of this very same sketch. I sort of just did a really sort of, how shall I say it, very alla prima, what you'd say, like the watercolor sketch, without planning it too much, just went straight in, did a very simple drawing that was much less accurate than this one, and just went with it and tried to recognize where the shadows are, where the lights are, and it's actually a good exercise to just try and paint the shapes of light and shadow, but this one definitely is more tight, more you know, just more finalized, I guess. Because I put much more work and effort into it, you know. I find that even if you're a beginner to some medium or you don't have a lot of experience, effort can really go a long way. There are a few paintings I did when I really just started with watercolor that weren't so good, I have to admit, but because I put so much effort into them, they turned out fairly good or realistic, or you know, so it's really effort plays an important role in this. So even if you're a beginner and you feel a bit frustrated, once in a while I think it's good to take one painting or one drawing and really focus on doing it slowly. You know, just try and do it slowly and really enjoy the long process and compare it to the ones you do like on a regular basis or the more regular ones, and see if you got better results by planning more and being more methodologic about this. Yeah. So just like with the video I published a few days ago about planning your watercolor paintings, it's the exact same concept. So yeah, now really nearing the end here. Just a few details and we're basically done with this one. Felt like this needed some darkening. Just very final touches, some details to the background. Not really a must, but you know, I decided to do it. Yeah. And just some grass blades to make the difference between the asphalt and the mountains clearer. And this is it. It's done. So friends, I hope you enjoyed seeing this sketch, this full sketching process from start to finish, from the planning to the end, the final result. Really, with this one, I really took my time building it up as well, so it's very contrasting with what I usually do, the spontaneous sketching and how I approach, you know, just looking at something and translating it immediately on paper. Here, of course, I felt like I need to put in some guidelines to help me and really understand how I'm approaching this, and the rest is just slowly building it up, slowly adding more details, trying to take some distance from it, really seeing if it looks like what you want it to look like. And yeah, this is it. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, follow me on Snapchat and Instagram, and I will see you again tomorrow.